I'd like to introduce myself a little bit. I'm a lifelong resident of Idaho. I was born and raised in Lewiston, and I've been fighting North Idaho roads my whole life. I'm a regional economist and clinical assistant professor at the College of Business and Economics, where I've been teaching and doing research projects for about 20 years. And since I'm taking the position that we should speed the completion of the highway, I just want to take a step back and point out that I take environmental issues very seriously, including biodiversity, sustainability, and global climate change. But I see this issue as both a NIMBY issue and a sustainability issue. NIMBY means not in my backyard. And if you go back into history of the issue, about 12 years ago, a group of well-meaning property owners and their allies on Paradise Ridge, they organized a group to protect their property rights and their way of life. And they put together a coalition that filed a lawsuit that blocked the highway realignment for the last 6 miles coming into Moscow. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Except the issue is being framed almost entirely as a sustainability issue, but the reality is more complex. It's both a NIMBY issue, people protecting their own parochial self-interest, and a sustainability issue both. And I think we need to consider that package when we look at the global consequences of the controversy. My position is that the project should have never been delayed 10 years ago, and I'm staunchly opposed to any further delay. I don't care who's to blame, whether it's the Idaho Department of Transportation or whether it's the Paradise Ridge Defense Coalition. I just want to see the realignment completed. In fairness to both parties, I just want to point out, hindsight is 20/20. I was looking at some of the documents back about a decade ago, and the safety issues were not so pronounced as they clearly, the data now clearly in hindsight shows. The opportunity cost of delay is much clearer looking backward 10 years than looking forward 10 years in the future. So I'm more concerned about the path forward than the back. I want to point out that in a perfect world, I would lean to the C3 alternative simply because it seems to be the path of least resistance. But I propose moving forward on one of the alternatives to get the road completed as quickly as possible. The next part of my presentation is that I don't think these delays pass a benefit cost assessment. Prophecy from the Lewiston Morning Tribune, this was April 1st of 2003, quoting a member of the Paradise Ridge Defense Coalition. Quote, "All we're saying is, if it takes another 10 years to do it, the delay would be worth it in the long run." Well, here we are, 10 years out. We can now evaluate, has the wait been worth it? Since the lawsuit was filed, there have been 6 deaths, 5 fatal crashes, 220 wrecks on this little 6 miles to the south of town, 138 injuries. The total cost is $41.3 million. I want to point out that the initial budgeted cost for the entire stretch of road that was actually built is just under $30 million. This goes from the top of Lewiston Hill all the way to the last 6 miles of town. If you take a look at the total budgeted project cost and put it in 2012 dollars, then the carnage is about 55% of what would be the total project cost going all the way from Lewiston all the way to Moscow. So the cost of doing nothing has been enormous. Forecast 2017, there's going to be an estimated 25 crashes per year and 11 deaths if nothing is done in terms of either road improvement or realignment. The estimated 2017 E2 crashes, in contrast, is 7.7 wrecks and 3.8 fatalities. But all 3 alternatives that are on the table will substantially reduce the loss. By the way, This makes for a very interesting educational case for the concept of opportunity cost, because we can measure it in crashes, we can measure it in dollars, and we can measure it in deaths and loss of life. In terms of the environmental concerns, I believe it is somewhat improperly exaggerated. One would think the Idaho Department of Transportation was attempting to put a freeway through Yosemite National Park, given all of the rhetoric about the environmental concerns over the last 10 years. But the reality is, we're talking about a 6-mile stretch of highway that's going to go, no matter where it goes, over what is primarily wheat fields and prairies. There are unique ecosystems in each one of these alternatives, very clearly. But I got to tell you, there is a unique ecosystem in every square mile on this planet. The issue is whether the unique features of these ecosystems are such as to block the only north-south area in North Idaho. And I believe it does not. Next section, the lack of understanding of Idaho's infrastructure and economy. Again, being a resident of Idaho, I remember former Governor Cecil Andrews, who famously labeled Highway 95 as a goat trail. Given how terrible US Highway 95 really was at that time, calling it a goat trail was a compliment. The truth of the matter is that road was god-awful. It's one of the most dangerous in the country historically. My father would drive us through the state of Washington and Oregon to go to New Plymouth, Idaho. He would bypass the road and go an additional 2 hours to the chagrin of us kids, just to avoid driving on that highway. Even with all the work that's been done on that highway, which started out as nothing more than a series of switchbacks all the way from Boise to Moscow, that took about 8 to 9 hours. If you go back about 40 years, it's still not a good highway. The transportation infrastructure in Idaho runs east and west. That's where all the money's been. That's where all it's gone. And guess where the economic growth is? East and west. You follow the Boise corridor all the way to Idaho Falls and Pocatello. That's where all the economic growth is in the south. Where's the economic growth in the north? It's on the Coeur d'Alene, Spokane corridor. Any part of the state that's depending on the north-south transportation system is experiencing very slow growth. And the economic activity has been lagging back. Moscow and Lake County are effectively not growing. Over the last decade, if it were not for the positive spillover economic activity from the rapid growth of Pullman, Schweitzer Engineering, Washington State student growth, and Washington State University's increase in revenues, the city of Moscow and Lake County would be in a recession or worse. And I want to point out there's been fairly robust economic activities to the south in the Lewis and Clark Valley. So we are surrounded by areas that are growing, and that spillover benefit has kept Lake County from really reeling from a serious recession. And so I think we should spend our time focusing a little bit more on economic development instead of blocking highway. The last section is highway dollars are as skin as hen's teeth, as the old saying goes. The local highway infrastructure, like most of North Idaho, is very underdeveloped. Moscow's not easy to get into or get out. And it complicates areas to grow the economy. So I was raised in a world that if you got scarce highway monies, wherever it came from, you grabbed it with both hands. And the statement went out to the highway officials, how can we help you, right? Not run the money off or file lawsuits to stop it. And I think sometimes the people of Moscow, at least some of them, live in a bubble in which they forget how hard it is to make a living outside of academia in the state of Idaho. And our road structure is an impediment to economic growth. So with so many competing uses for highway money, I think that we need to focus on how to make the project be completed more quickly. I'm given all of the delays that have taken place over the last decade, I'm actually surprised that the funding for this stretch of the highway is still available. And I fear that if we have any more delays with getting this alignment completed, we'll lose the highway money altogether. And so I think we need to act. Thank you very much.